We are back on Nittany Game Week. Time for our Impact interview, and it's always fun to catch up with Scranton, PA native Yogi Roth, now with the Big Ten Network, was an assistant coach at USC. He played wide receiver at Pitt, award-winning filmmaker, also an author. Let's get right to it, Yogi. Penn State, one of the teams that needed to bring in somebody during this cycle of coaching hires. What kind of fit do you think Matt Campbell is in Happy Valley?
Oh, I think it's incredible. I think anybody who's tracked the sport knows what Matt Campbell's path has been, from Pitt to Mount Union to where he obviously landed eventually at Iowa State. And I called an Iowa State game last year, so I got to spend time with he and Taylor Mauser and a lot of members on the staff that'll find their way to Happy Valley. And you're just so impressed. His name was circulating when the SC thing was popping, when Lincoln Riley took the job a couple years ago. So you started doing a little bit more dive, thinking he might come to the league that you're covering at the time. But then when you saw that happen, number one, I thought they nailed it. Number two, after his press conference, then you start following all the things that he's doing within the facility, or talk to people on the staff, or those that might even be in limbo. His regard for everyone in that building is just incredible. The way people talk about him, the way obviously he has won, the way he's built teams, identified talent, developed talent. And then I think that the best part of it all was, and this is, I think, Coach, you probably agree, when somebody lands a job that they've looked at their entire careers and it becomes reality. And we've seen that with, the coordinators in this cycle. We've seen that with head coaches in the past, but to see it happen here in this regard with his family nearby, like, you couldn't help but be like, yeah, I'm a root for this man in every step of the way. So a wild search, but as the dust settled, I think Penn State's going to come out really looking impressive with the right guy for the job.
So watching this season unfold in the Big Ten, there were some surprises. What kind of things surprised you the most? And talk about the quarterback play in this league and how good it has gotten.
Yeah, well, if you go back to media days, I was sitting on set with Jerry DiNardo and Dave Revson, our Big Ten Network crew. And, you kind of make a big proclamation for the year. And mine was, I thought it was going to be the best year in the history of the Big Ten at quarterback. And I haven't been covering this league for the history of the league, but I've been around it growing up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I've watched Big Ten football my whole life. And it just felt like it never had the depth. And then jumping into the league 2 years ago, my biggest critique of it was, I just thought the quarterback play was disappointing, across the board. Like, you didn't see it at an elite premium level. And you looked at it this year, over 30 games were one-score games in conference play. And it went the way of the quarterback, whether that was Drake Lindsey on a game-winning drive, or Dylan Raiola making a play late, or UCLA and Nico Imaliava making a play late. You just kind of could turn the TV on, whatever channel, and it felt like once you got to conference play, these games were really tight for the most part, and it was. And then you watch Fernando and Julian duel in the Big Ten title game, and you're saying, yep, this is not only just the most premier league from the top, you look at winning national championships, but I look all across it, and it'll change again, right? We all know what's happening. I mean, you wrote the nonfiction, or excuse me, the fiction book about the portal and all the chaos that happens with your book Blitz, but part of that is also reality. So I think there's a desire to come play in this league. I talked to a lot of the quarterbacks during the cycle last year that found their way to the Big Ten, and a huge pull was, I want to play in this league.
So, Yogi, after year two of West Coast teams in the Big Ten, what positives have they brought into the league on the field, and where might those schools have to improve?
Well, I always felt that once NIL became a thing and the portal became active, there was just going to be desire for players to see what was going on out west, whether that's media and marketing opportunities in a city like Los Angeles, where I reside with USC and UCLA respectively, whether that was Seattle and all the Fortune 500 companies that exist in that great city. And then you look at Eugene and the brand they have. I thought they were going to start to potentially climb some of these blue blood, long-time brands in the Big Ten. And I don't know if they're just leapfrogging people, but they're part of the conversation, right? But I also look at Oregon, and you think of the Big Ten now, and I get that it's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, Michigan State. Like, there's historicals, but you cannot ignore what they've done on the field, undefeated in year one, only one loss in league play in year two, and I think they are a dark horse here where we sit in the college football playoff to make real noise. So I think that the league's only growing. Then you look at the young talent in Seattle. Damon Williams. We'll see what happens with Denzel Boston. You look at this young offensive line. They got true freshmen playing on the offensive line to tackle and guard. I mean, they look good defensively. They're flying around. They dominated Boise State in the bowl game. I mean, they look the part. And Jed is, to me, I've known him for almost 20 years now. He's a dear friend, but he's a heck of a ball coach. And then at UCLA with Bob Chesney now coming in, he's my favorite stat of Coach Chesney. He's coached in 183 games in advance to this year's college football playoff as a head coach. So the reps, coach, you know this, on the sideline, in situational football, managing a team, I don't care where you're doing it, but to be able to do that at his age, I think is going to bode really well for the Bruins. And again, the ripe recruiting ground here in Los Angeles. These 4 teams aren't slowing down. 3 of them have taken big steps, and we'll see what the Bruins do, but I think they'll only obviously be improving from where they stood this year. Yeah, well, I've known Fernando for a long time. When he was at Cal, I was calling a lot of his games. And I could recall going to training camp his redshirt freshman season and pulling the head coach at the time, Justin Wilcox, over. And I said, who's that guy? Because his arm kind of stands out. He goes, we got this guy. He's a 2-star recruit. Kind of got him late. He was on his way to Yale. So we'll see. He's got a chance. Like, he's got the clay. We'll see if we can mold it. And Bill Musgrave, the great Bill Musgrave from Oregon and, playing the NFL. I mean, he's obviously an accomplished coach. He's the one that found him. In recruiting, they kind of needed a guy late. So you got to give him a ton of credit. He does, he develops. But from the first time I met him, it was Mr. Roth, Mr. Paterno. Like, it was shake your hand, look you in the eye. I mean, it was almost like, whoa, what is this? It was so different than any other experience you had. But then I've stayed in touch with him over the years, whether it was texting or talking to him before the season. And I love where he went in terms of Indiana, not just because he thought he could do what Curtis Rourke did a year ago, but because he talked to his brother. And the way that his brother talked about the system of offense under Mike Shanahan, the offensive coordinator, former Pitt Panther, Heddle Pitt, but the way in which that he has learned the game. And I think Fernando said, that's what I need. And what's most impressive that has gotten zero play about him is that he has had a different coordinator every year he's been a starter in college. Every single year. So it's not like he's going to a system and he came with a coordinator and he knew him at Indiana. He had to learn everything again. And I just think that is unbelievable when you look in this portal era where guys are going. Often when you go your first year, the offense is nowhere near as complex as it could be or should be. You got to just play and play fast and play efficient. He's played at an insane level, and he's met the moment. You referenced Penn State. How about Iowa? How about Oregon? Every time he's had to be on the road, away from Bloomington and that stadium, Memorial Stadium, he's met the moment. Big Ten title game. And that's why I voted for him for the Heisman Trophy. I was really happy to see him win it. And then I think I saw one of the coolest moments in my career, which was his teammates waiting for him at the post-Heisman press conference, mobbing him. I've covered the Heisman almost a decade, being in New York every year, and I've never once seen that. It was just a beautiful example of how his teammates regard him. Yeah, well, I think there's another level even deeper than that. Coaches leaving teams, obviously that's not okay. Players not being able to be on their teams, that's not okay. I mean, there's the obvious that is not okay. I also look to the craft and the profession. I don't know how appealing it's going to be to some people that are thinking, do I come down from the National Football League? It's one thing for the money, but to your point of the calendar and the structure, it's a little out of whack. As I play this thing out a couple of years, if you said, okay, put your commissioner cap on, I would urge people to say, how do we make college football entertaining? I believe this, and I hate to say it, but when the season and the games end, a dark cloud comes over our sport. Now, it goes away when the playoff games start again, and it goes away when spring practice starts again and training camp, but it kind of is always hovering. It's hovering around the portal, it's hovering around NIL, it's hovering around coaches leaving. And if you look at, obviously, the NFL, and this is pseudo-NFL light, look at all the teams now posting photos of their players signing like they just signed an extension in the National Football League. They're signing for their 6-month agreement or their 8-month agreement, whatever might be pending eligibility. And I just think there's a world where we can make this entertaining. Like, how fun would it be to have a show that is after the season that talks about free agency in the portal, that talks about signing day, that talks about the coaching carousel? Right now, it's not. And when you're Indiana, Ohio State having signing day the same week of the Big Ten title, the same week that players are announcing that they're going to the portal, as you have to navigate your own roster, I just think it's a gray cloud. And I think the more and more we wait and don't do anything, I think fans are going to get turned off. And I just think that the periphery of the game is going to become one where you're like, I don't want to watch that anymore. And the blue blood fans, they'll always be in because that's what it is. But these other teams that are, call it 30 through 60 in power football. It's hard. I think it's hard. And I think that part gets ignored when all we do is talk about how great the game is and viewership and the numbers. Like, we're not talking about the other 30 teams where life is a challenge, and the calendar doesn't help any of them. So I would urge that to be a huge part of it. I think it would make even more money because of TV and entertainment and all the things. But right now, it's a little bit of a mess, and the academic calendar has a lot to do with that. And that's where I think people on the academic side, like, there has to be a little bit of an adjustment among all and say, okay, the sport has changed. And the degrees, they aren't as valued in my lens as they once were, as much as I value them. I want my kids to value them. In college football, it's about playing. And that's the sad truth of it. So there's a lot that has to change, but I would start with trying to make this thing entertaining instead of a dark cloud sometimes that comes over our sport.